Her true story from Georgia. My son threw my pill bottle and screamed, "We're not a charity, move out," so I left and took the deed with me. By breakfast I was gone. By dinner, so was the roof over their heads. "Stop bleeding me dry, you leech. You are not worthy of being my mother anymore. An old, useless hag like you should be ready to rot in the ground." Those were the exact words my son screamed at me that morning, standing across the kitchen island where I had once packed his school lunches and cooled his fevered brow with damp rags soaked in vinegar. His face twisted into something unrecognizable, red with fury, his fists clenched, chest heaving. His wife was somewhere nearby, pretending to be busy, pretending not to hear, like always. I stood there, motionless, my fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the ache that crept up my left arm every time I missed my heart medication. My pill bottle lay on the floor, knocked from the counter during his outburst, the little orange container rolling under the edge of the refrigerator. A few white pills had spilled and scattered like teeth knocked from a mouth. I stared at the floor for a moment, then slowly bent to my knees, one hand bracing against the countertop. It hurt, but I did it silently. No groan, no whimper, just silence. My son said nothing either. He had already turned his back. As I reached for the bottle, the plastic cool and familiar in my palm, a memory came flooding back, the kind that rises without permission and settles like lead in the stomach. I was 28 and single, working the night shift at the hospital, scraping together enough to buy my son a used laptop for college. I remember skipping meals so he could have a full pantry when he moved into the dorm. I remember sewing patches onto his jeans instead of buying new ones. I remember every sacrifice, every meal I went without, every ache I ignored, all to make sure he had enough. I gave him everything I had. And now he stood there, calling me a leech. I had known for months that something was changing. It started small, as these things often do, little comments made under breath, or the way his wife would sigh when I entered a room. Then came the decisions made without me, moving my things from the upstairs bedroom to the laundry room under the stairs because the kids needed more space, unplugging the TV in my room to cut costs, asking if I really needed the air conditioning on all night at your age. It escalated gradually, but consistently, like a slow-moving train you could see coming miles away but could not stop. Each month brought new humiliations dressed as practical requests. I was told I was too noisy, too opinionated, too present. I was asked to give them privacy, then blamed for being distant. I could not win. I stopped trying. I had moved in after my husband passed. Cancer. He was gone in 7 months. I did not want to be alone in the house we had shared for 40 years. My son said it would be good for everyone if I moved in with them in the suburbs of Georgia. Help with the kids, keep me company, save money. It made sense. At the time, it felt like love. At first it was fine, we made it work. I kept to myself, helped where I could, paid more than my share of bills, even though they never asked. I used my nursing pension to help them when things were tight. When the water heater broke, I wrote the check. When their car needed repairs, I covered it. I was happy to help. Family helps each other. Or so I believed. When they found the house, it was more than they could afford. Their credit was poor and the lender hesitated. They needed a co-signer. I offered, thinking nothing of it. My name went on the mortgage and the deed. I never thought that decision would one day be used against me. I never thought they would forget what that meant. Now here we were, years later, and my son stood in my kitchen, because make no mistake, it was still mine, whether they remembered it or not, screaming at me like I was a stray dog who refused to leave the porch. "You act like we owe you something," he said, not even bothering to look at me now. "We took you in. We gave you a place to stay. That should be enough." I felt my spine straighten, not from pride, but from instinct, a habit left over from years of keeping composure through hospital chaos, crying children, and now grown sons turned bitter. "I never asked you to take me in," I said softly. He scoffed. "Oh, please. What were you going to do, live alone and die in that old house?" I said nothing. He walked to the fridge, opened it, took out a soda. Drank straight from the can. "You think just because you bought a few groceries and babysat a few nights, you get to live here rent-free forever." That was when I realized he did not remember the mortgage, or he had convinced himself it did not matter, that I was a guest in his house, a burden, a mistake, and that whatever I had done before meant nothing now. I picked up the last pill and capped the bottle. "If you want me gone, just say so," I said. He turned, looked me in the eye for the first time that morning. "Fine. I want you gone. I am tired of walking on eggshells. We have plans for this house. Maybe rent the room out. Someone who actually contributes." I nodded. Behind him, his wife walked into the room, phone in hand. She gave me a half smile, the kind people give when they have already won something. I turned away from them both, my feet cold against the tile floor, and walked slowly to my room. Not the one upstairs where I used to sleep near the babies, but the makeshift space they gave me near the laundry machines. The mattress was lumpy. The air always smelled like detergent. It was where they kept the dog's crate now, too. I opened the drawer of the nightstand, an old piece I brought from my home, and pulled out an envelope. Inside was the original copy of the deed, my name, alone. It had never been changed. I remembered signing it, remembered the way the pen felt in my hand, how the notary smiled and said, "Congratulations, ma'am, you own a beautiful home." They never bothered to remove me, too busy, too sure I would never leave, too certain I had nowhere else to go. I placed the envelope in my suitcase. Then I went back to the kitchen. They were still there, pretending to be casual, pretending not to notice me as I moved with deliberate calm. I opened the cabinet, pulled down the kettle, filled it with water, set it on the stove. My son watched me. "What are you doing?" "I'm making tea." He rolled his eyes. "You do not have to be dramatic. Just go." I smiled. "I will," I said. "Tomorrow." Then I sat at the table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, and watched the steam rise. I sipped slowly. I did not blink when he cursed under his breath and walked away. I did not move when his wife said, "This is what I mean," always making things awkward. I simply sipped, because I knew by breakfast I would be gone, and by dinner so would the roof over their heads. I was 24 when my husband walked out the door and never came back. He left behind a half-eaten dinner, a toddler clinging to my skirt, and a note that said, "I need to find myself." I never saw him again. No calls, no child support, no letters, just silence and a trail of unpaid bills. I cried once, just once, and then I picked up my shoes, tied my apron, and got to work. I became a nurse because I had to. It was never about ambition or prestige. It was about survival. I worked double shifts in emergency rooms that smelled like bleach and desperation. I cleaned wounds and held hands. I wiped tears and faced death more times than I can count. I stitched up children and whispered comfort to men who would never go home again. And through all of it, I came home to one thing, my son. He was my reason. I remember sitting in the break room on my 10-minute lunch break, eating saltine crackers and counting the minutes until I could go home and kiss his forehead. I sold my wedding ring to buy his first bike. I sewed his Halloween costumes from fabric scraps. I never remarried, never even dated. My world was him. And for a long time, I believed I had done something right. He was bright, handsome, full of charm. People always said, "He's going to do great things, that one." I believed them. I believed in him more than I ever believed in myself. When he met her, his wife, I welcomed her. She was polite at first, maybe a little distant, but I chalked it up to nerves. Not every daughter-in-law wants to live under the same roof as her husband's mother. I understood that. I tried to make myself small, helpful, invisible if needed. I watched the grandkids, cooked meals, cleaned up messes, all without being asked. I stayed out of their arguments, respected their space, and smiled when I was expected to. But things began to shift. The house they wanted was too expensive, their credit was a mess, the result of student loans, credit cards, and one ill-advised investment in a revolutionary vegan dog food startup. They were turned down by the first lender. And the second. I could see the strain in their eyes. So I offered to help. I didn't even wait for them to ask. I stood as co-singer on the mortgage. The house was beautiful. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, oak trees lining the driveway. It had the space they needed and the charm they craved. But none of it would have happened without me. I remember sitting in the bank, signing the papers, and my son squeezing my hand. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "You saved us." I smiled. Because that is what mothers do. We save them, even when they do not realize they need saving. I dipped into my retirement to cover the down payment. I paid the first year of insurance and covered the cost of moving. When the foundation cracked 6 months later, I paid for repairs. When the HVAC failed, I bought the new system. I told myself it was an investment in family, in legacy. I told myself that one day, when I could no longer care for myself, they would remember. But that is not what happened. Once the ink dried and the rooms filled, I began to disappear. Not all at once. It started with a couch cushion being moved, then a shelf cleared for their new decor. Then my rocking chair, the one I had held my son in when he was sick with the flu, was pushed into the garage to make space. Eventually, I was moved downstairs entirely, to what they called the guest room. It was really a converted storage space next to the laundry area, where the sound of spinning drums became my lullaby. I tried not to take it personally. I kept helping, kept cooking, folding laundry, writing checks when needed, but gratitude turned to expectation. Expectation turned to entitlement. I went from being the matriarch to being the maid. The way they spoke to me changed too. "Did you eat already?" my daughter-in-law would ask, not out of concern but as a warning. "Don't touch what's hers. We kind of need more space for the baby's things," she said once, eyeing my dresser. "You're always here," she said another time, her voice brittle with irritation. I began to eat alone in my room. I began to silence myself at the dinner table. I began to feel like a visitor in a house that bore my name on legal documents they had long forgotten. Then came the whispers they thought I could not hear. "I feel like she's watching us all the time," she said once, late at night. "She's not even paying rent," my son replied, his voice low but sharp. They forgot the repairs I had paid for, the furniture I had brought, the nights I had spent walking their colicky babies up and down the hallway while they slept through it. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "She's like this shadow," my daughter-in-law said, "this old ghost that won't move on. It's exhausting." "I know," my son replied. "It's like she's just waiting to die. Honestly, sometimes I wish she would. We could finally breathe." They were in the next room. The door was half closed. They had no idea I was folding laundry just steps away. I dropped a towel and stood still, my heart hammering in my chest. They did not even lower their voices. "She's lived long enough," he said, "and now she's just dragging us down. It's like we're stuck in limbo waiting for her to go. A shadow, a ghost, a weight they carried unwillingly." I stood there with a pair of baby socks in my hands, socks I had bought, washed, folded, and I felt something in me fracture. It was not the words. It was the certainty with which they were spoken, the comfort, the absence of guilt. I realized then I was no longer his mother in his eyes. I was no longer the woman who had given up everything for him. I was no longer family. I was just another inconvenience, a burden, and they had started to make plans for life without me. But what they did not know, what they had chosen to forget, was that I had once signed something too, something they never removed, something they would soon regret leaving in my name. Because I may have been quiet, but I was not stupid, and I never forgot who I was. Not then, not ever. It started with a printed envelope slipped under my door. No greeting, no warmth, just a printed line at the top, statement of monthly contribution. At first I thought it was a mistake, some billing notice meant for someone else, but when I opened it, my name was there, clear as day. They wanted me to pay rent, $800 a month, due by the 5th. No discussion, no warning, just a typed-up demand for shared utility burden and fair occupancy contribution. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I wanted to laugh, truly I did, but my chest ached. The kind of ache that doesn't go away with a heating pad or aspirin. I walked into the living room, holding the envelope in my hand. My son was watching TV, feet on the coffee table I had bought. "What is this?" I asked. He muted the television without looking at me. "It's just what's fair, Mom. Everyone contributes. We talked about it." "No," I said softly, "you did not." He sighed, like my confusion was exhausting. "You use water, electricity, Wi-Fi. You eat meals here. You live here. You should help with the cost. That is all we are saying." "I already helped with the cost," I replied. "I helped buy this house." He finally looked at me then, but it was not guilt in his eyes. It was calculation. That was years ago. "You cannot just keep bringing that up. You live here now. Things are tight." They were not tight. They had a new SUV, a remodeled kitchen, and a yearly beach trip to Destin. I walked back to my room slowly, my joints stiff, the paper still shaking in my hand. A week later, I found my bed dismantled and moved, my dresser gone. When I asked what was happening, my daughter-in-law said, "The kids need more space. We are making the upstairs more functional." I was moved downstairs into what had once been a storage room. Cement floor, one tiny window, a pull-out cot with a thin mattress. No closet, no privacy. "Plenty of people sleep in basements," she said. "It is not like you have back problems, right?" She knew I did. I had a slipped disc. I had told her after my fall last year. Meals changed, too. I used to cook for the family, sometimes elaborate Sunday dinners with roast chicken and sweet potato pie. That stopped. My daughter-in-law began portioning my meals separately, smaller plates, no seconds. Sometimes I would find Post-its on the fridge, for the kids, not for Mom, already counted. My medication, once kept in the kitchen cabinet, was moved to a box in the laundry room. The pills were mixed up once, twice. I said nothing. I began keeping them in a pouch in my pocket. Then came the loneliness. My church group used to meet every second Saturday. We would sing, drink sweet tea, and talk about our grandchildren. One day I went to the driveway to wait for Linda, my friend from church. She always picked me up. She never came. When I called her later, her voice was confused, cautious. "Your son told me you were under the weather," she said. "He said you were not really up for socializing lately." That was news to me. She paused. "He also said you might be moving to a facility. He did not want to stress you." A facility. That was how they phrased it. I did not sleep that night, or the one after. I began waking with a start, imagining locks on my bedroom door, my belongings on the lawn. The next Sunday, I went outside to sit on the porch and wave at the neighbors as I always did. Only they did not wave back. When I greeted Mr. Jenkins, he gave a tight smile. "Still here," he said. "Excuse me?" He cleared his throat. "Oh, nothing. Just heard from your boy you were planning to move a while back. Thought you'd be gone by now." Gone by now. They were spreading rumors. They were painting me as someone who had overstayed her welcome, someone clinging to a house she had no right to. I had become the villain in their story. The morning it happened, I had woken early, my heart racing, chest tight. I reached for my pill bottle in the dark and realized it was empty. I had reminded my daughter-in-law 2 days earlier to pick up the refill. She had nodded, smiled. The refill had not come. I stumbled to the hallway, knocking on their bedroom door. No answer. I knocked again. My head was spinning. Finally, the door creaked open. She looked at me with one eyebrow raised. "I do not have my medication," I said, voice hoarse. She rolled her eyes. "It is 6:30 in the morning. I need it." My chest. She raised a hand. "You are being dramatic again." And then she shut the door. I turned around and tried to make it to the kitchen. I do not remember falling. I only remember the cold floor against my cheek and the sound of the dog barking. When I came to, I was still on the floor. My grandson was crying somewhere upstairs. She stood above me, arms crossed. "See?" she muttered, always putting on a show. "She is fine." I tried to speak, but my lips felt numb. My son came down a moment later, rubbing his eyes. "What now?" he asked. "She just dropped like a stone," his wife said. "No warning. Just collapsed. Honestly, I think it is just attention-seeking." He walked past me to the fridge, opened a bottle of water. "I am not calling an ambulance," he said. "She will get over it. She always does." I lay there for another 10 minutes before I was able to sit up. My breath shallow, my hands trembling. No one helped me. When I finally stood, I walked back to my room and sat on the edge of the cot. I stared at the wall for a long time. Then I took out my notebook, and I began to write down every date, every payment I made, every expense I covered, every moment of cruelty. I did not cry. This is my second time, because when the time came, I would not beg, I would not argue, I would show them what they had forgotten, and I would do it in silence. There is a little safe at the back of my old closet. It is rusted on the outside, dusty from years of disuse, but the dial still turns smooth as butter. It was my husband's once, and after he passed, I never had the heart to throw it out. I just moved it from house to house, from memory to memory, like a quiet guardian of everything I once thought would matter only in emergencies. That morning, it became more than a box. It became my proof. The light in the basement was dim, flickering like a tired eye, but I did not need much light to remember what I was looking for. My fingers found the key, taped to the bottom of the third drawer, right where I had hidden it all those years ago. When I turned the key and opened the safe, I could almost hear my late husband's voice. "Keep the originals, Lila. People forget. Paper remembers." He had been right about many things. This was the one I clung to. Inside were folders, some yellowed with age, others neatly labeled in my handwriting. Mortgage, deed, bank transfers, home repairs. Even the folder labeled emergency savings, though that was nearly empty now. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the cold seeping through my bones, and began sorting. There it was, the original purchase agreement for the house. My name, my signature, no mention of my son. He had terrible credit back then and no bank would approve him. I had told him I would co-sign to help, but we never added him to the deed. They never asked me to. They just assumed. There was the payment record. 5 years of monthly mortgage bills, all paid from my checking account. Every canceled check, every confirmation receipt. There was the record of the down payment from my pension fund. There were the receipts for the roof repair, the HVAC system, the foundation work after the first heavy rain. There were the utility bills, water, gas, electric, all in my name. I sat there for nearly 2 hours, organizing, labeling, breathing slow and steady through every emotion that passed through me like a storm. Not anger, not quite, more like clarity, cold and sharp. When I had everything I needed, I took out my cell phone and dialed the number I had not called in over a decade. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Morrison Kane Law Office." "This is Lila Avery," I said. "I was married to James Avery. You handled his will years ago." There was a pause, then a kind intake of breath. "Lila, of course, this is Roger. I remember you. I still have the file. How can I help?" "I need to know the legal standing of my home," I said, "the one I live in now. There's a situation." He listened quietly as I explained. I gave him the address, the dates, the names. He asked me to email him the scanned copies of everything. I did it right there, sitting on the basement floor, using the scanner app he walked me through. When he called me back later that afternoon, his tone was gentle but firm. "Lila, it's exactly as you remember. You are the sole legal owner of the property. Your name is on the deed, and there's no secondary party listed. Your son and his family, well, they're not tenants, not legally. They're guests, and you're well within your rights to ask them to leave." I closed my eyes for a long moment. "I don't want to cause harm," I said. "You're not," he replied. "You're establishing boundaries." He offered to handle the paperwork for me. Said he would email a formal notice to vacate, with my signature, required, and a 30-day timeline, though he reminded me I could give less if I chose to. I told him I would decide by the end of the day. I hung up and sat still. The basement was quiet, the hum of the dryer the only sound. Upstairs, I could hear the faint thud of my grandson's feet running across the floor. My son's voice, laughing at something on the TV. They did not know, not yet, but they would. I printed the letter, read it twice, signed my name at the bottom with a hand that no longer shook. Then I walked to the mailbox 2 blocks away, not because I had to, but because I wanted the walk. I wanted to feel the weight of that letter in my coat pocket, close to my heart. At the mailbox, I paused, not because I was unsure, but because I knew. I slid the envelope in and listened to it drop, a sound so soft it might have been mistaken for nothing at all. But I knew better. That sound was the end of their assumption, the end of my silence, the end of them living in a house they believed was theirs, under a roof I had paid for, under terms they never understood. I turned around and walked home slowly. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a guest. I felt like the owner. I woke up before the sun that morning. The house was quiet, still tucked under the weight of sleep, unaware that this would be the last morning it would ever know me. My back ached the way it always did. My knees protested when I swung my legs off the cot, but I moved with a calm steadiness. There was no hesitation in me, only decision. I slipped into the kitchen, barefoot, careful not to make a sound. The dog lifted his head but did not bark. He always liked me more than they did. I started the coffee, the good kind, the one I kept hidden in a sealed jar behind the cleaning supplies because she always bought the cheap brand. I took out the flour, the eggs, the vanilla, and began to bake. Banana bread, their favorite. I knew the recipe by heart, not from a cookbook but from memory. Just like everything else I had given them. As the oven warmed the air, I set the table like I used to when they first moved in, napkins folded, plates warmed, little touches that nobody had asked for, yet always expected. I placed the banana bread in the center, golden and soft, and poured 3 cups of coffee. No one would thank me, but I did not do it for gratitude. I did it because it was the last time, the last quiet act of a woman they thought they had erased. I walked back to my room, the basement room, the one they gave me when I stopped being family and started being furniture, and I pulled my suitcase from the closet. It was already packed. 1 week of planning. 1 week of folding silently, hiding bags beneath old coats, moving things slowly so no one would notice. They did not. They never looked. Everything I owned now fit into a single suitcase and a canvas tote. My life, reduced to zippers and straps. On the kitchen table, next to the banana bread, I placed a handwritten note on my best stationery. It said, "Thank you for finally showing me who you are." Beside it, I placed an envelope. Inside was the formal eviction notice, the deed in my name, copies of payment receipts, and a signed declaration from my lawyer. They had 48 hours to vacate. I stood in the hallway for a moment and looked around one last time. The picture frames were full of memories that no longer belonged to me. The toys strewn across the carpet were no longer for me to pick up. The echo of children's laughter that once made my heart swell now felt distant, like a memory that had been sharpened into something that could cut. I did not cry. I closed the door gently behind me and walked out into the cool morning air. May lived 2 towns over. She and I had worked the same floor at the hospital decades ago. I had helped her through her divorce, helped her raise 3 children when her ex disappeared with the car and the savings. We had lost touch after retirement, as people often do. But last week, when I called and told her everything, she said 3 words, "Come home, Lila." She met me at the front gate in a lavender housecoat, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her arms open like no time had passed. We hugged for a long time. She did not ask why I looked tired. She knew. That afternoon, I sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of sweet tea, and told her everything. The rent demand, the basement room, the withheld medication, the fall, the papers, the silence. She listened without interrupting, her fingers brushing the rim of her mug. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "Well, it is about time the world learns you were never just a shadow in someone else's house." We laughed then, both of us loud and free, the kind of laugh you forget how much you missed until it fills your chest again. Back at the house I left behind, they would be waking up soon, expecting banana bread, expecting me to be there, like I always was, quiet, predictable, endlessly available. Instead, they would find the coffee gone cold, the bread untouched, and my seat at the table empty. And on that table, a thick envelope. I imagined my son picking it up, his name printed on the front in my cursive. I imagined his wife asking what it was, her voice already sharp with suspicion. I imagined him opening it and reading each page, his face changing as he realized that the home he thought he controlled was never his to begin with. They would scream, they would deny, they would call me. I would not answer. They would call again. But by then I would be gone. Settled in May's guest room, with a window that overlooked a little garden and a chair that did not creak when I sat in it. May had already brewed another pot of coffee. She handed me a mug and said, "To freedom." I raised it, "To remembering who you are before they tried to rewrite you." That night, I slept with the window open, and for the first time in years I slept without fear of being watched, without the weight of being unwelcome in my own life. And in the silence of May's spare room, I dreamed not of what I had lost, but of what I had finally taken back. My name, my worth, my home. The rain came fast that afternoon, drumming on the pavement with a kind of urgency that makes everything feel heavier. The sky had turned a tired gray, swollen with clouds that refused to hold back. I sat by May's window with a warm cup of tea, watching the lake ripple with every drop. It was quiet here, peaceful. The kind of place where people waved from their porches, and the wind didn't carry shouting through the walls. My phone rang for the first time just after 3:00 p.m., then again at 3:02, 3:05, 3:07. Each time, the same name lit up the screen. Dave, my son. I did not answer. By the 4th call, he left a voicemail, his voice strained, on edge. "Mom, what is this? What is this letter? What the hell is going on?" At 3:10, a message from his wife. "You've lost your mind. We took care of you, and this is how you repay us? That word again. Repay. I turned off my phone and placed it in the drawer beside May's sewing basket. By evening, the messages turned into threats. Then please, then silence. They showed up at May's house the next morning, soaked from the drive, rage and desperation clinging to them like the rainwater dripping from their jackets. May opened the door, standing tall in her doorway with her apron still on and a spoon in her hand. "We're looking for Lila," my daughter-in-law snapped. "She's not here," May replied, voice calm. "And even if she were, she wouldn't come out just to be shouted at." "She's our mother," David barked. May blinked slowly. "You remember that now?" They did not come back. A week later, the sheriff posted the final notice on the front door of the house they thought belonged to them. 30 days. That was the grace period I gave them, more than they ever gave me. I could have enforced it faster, but I wanted them to sit in it, to feel what it's like to wake up in a house knowing it no longer wants you. They tried to fight it, of course, claimed squatters' rights, hired a cheap lawyer, said I was mentally unstable, vindictive, emotionally manipulative. But the paper trail did not lie. The deed, the payments, the records, they all sang the same truth. It was never their home. Their names weren't even on the utility bills. When the eviction finalized, they had no plan, no apartment lined up, no savings to put down a deposit. Their credit was still shot from years of negligence. No landlord would take them with an active legal dispute on file. They moved into a motel 2 towns over. I heard this from a neighbor, the sweet woman down the road who used to bring over pies during the holidays. She called me one morning, said she saw them packing boxes with their heads down, like shadows dragging behind their own shame. "I wish I'd known," she told me. "I would have helped you sooner." "You did," I said. "You believed me." A few weeks later, I sold the house. Not to a developer. Not to someone who would tear down everything I built. I sold it to a woman named Sherry, a single mother of 2, working full-time at the post office, saving for years. She'd always admired the house from across the street, but never thought she'd be able to afford it. I gave her a price she could manage. When we signed the papers, she cried. Not from stress, like I once did, but from joy. "I'll take care of it," she promised. "I'll make it a home again." I believed her. She planted wildflowers in the front yard, painted the mailbox a cheerful blue, hung curtains in the living room window where my son once shouted at me in front of my grandson. 3 months after they left, David came back. He stood on the porch with a paper bag in one hand and a weary look that didn't belong to the boy I raised, but to a man who had burned every bridge and now stood cold in the water. "Sherry opened the door," he asked to speak with me. She told him I didn't live there anymore. Then he asked to buy the house back. "I can pay more than she did," he insisted. I need it back, please." She tilted her head, then said something I will never forget. "I bought this house from a woman who knew her worth," she said. "A mother who was more generous than you ever deserved. You lost it the moment you forgot who she was. You don't just get to undo that." Then she closed the door. He stood on the porch for a moment longer, then walked away. Not a word since, not a letter, not a call. But sometimes, when the sky goes gray and the rain taps on the window, I wonder if he remembers the sound of banana bread baking, the way I folded his socks, the way I used to wait up when he was out too late, just to make sure he got home safe. Maybe he does, or maybe he's still trying to figure out when exactly the house stopped being his. The answer is simple. It never was. The kitchen in my new home is small, but it is mine. The light filters through the window at just the right angle each morning, warming the floor beneath my feet as I stand barefoot, waiting for the kettle to whistle. I keep the countertops clear, the spice rack organized, and the cookie jar full, just in case I have visitors, which I do now and then. But mostly it is quiet, and I like it that way. I planted tomatoes last month, just 2 rows, behind the little fence May helped me install. They're coming in slow but steady, like me. Some mornings I talk to them while I water, tell them about the women I met the night before, about the breeze off the lake, about how it feels to wake up in a place where no one rolls their eyes when you hum while cooking. Sometimes I write letters, not to anyone in particular, just to myself. I have a little box of them now, dated and folded neatly. One of them says, "You did not die, you just needed to leave." That's what it felt like, really. Like resurrection, like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel I had convinced myself was home. It did not take long before I found purpose again. There is a women's center not far from here, quiet building with soft chairs and staff who know how to listen. I started volunteering on Thursdays, sharing coffee and stories with women my age who have been through things their children will never know. I tell them my story. I tell them about the deed, the room, the pills, the silence, and their eyes fill with the kind of tears that do not fall but sit there, heavy and trembling. I tell them to keep their documents, to remember their names, to sign nothing blindly. Some of them started calling me Grandma Justice. I laugh every time, but I keep showing up. Last week, I helped a woman named Carol go over her home title. Her son had asked her to refinance in his name. She was hesitant. I looked her in the eye and said, "If they treat you like furniture, do not hand them the house." She smiled for the first time all day. And me? I am smiling too, more than I thought I would. My son still calls. He sends messages too. Sometimes they come at night, the time when regret speaks the loudest. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Can I see you?" I do not answer. It's not out of cruelty, it's out of clarity. He made a choice when he threw my pill bottle, when he raised his voice instead of his heart, when he let me collapse on the floor without calling for help. He chose to forget who I was to him. And now, I have chosen to remember who I am, for myself. I am a mother, yes, but motherhood is not a contract for endless forgiveness. It is not a vow to carry a grown man across every bridge he insists on burning. There comes a time when even the most devoted mother must set her child down and let him walk, no matter how many times he falls. My task ended the day he told me to leave, and leave I did. Now I spend my mornings in peace, sipping coffee that does not taste bitter anymore. I fill my afternoons with fresh air, folded letters, and the kind of laughter that only comes from knowing you were right to stand your ground. There is no anger left in me, only space for tomatoes, for stories, for second chances, mine, not his. And every now and then, I sit in my new kitchen, tea steeping, and I smile at the breeze through the open window. Not because everything turned out perfect, but because I finally did. I do not hate my son. I say that not because I am some sainted figure who has transcended pain, but because hate is too heavy to carry when you are finally free. What I feel now is quieter, deeper. It is the weightless understanding that sometimes the ones we love most are the ones who must be left behind. If he had never called me a leech, if he had never slammed my pill bottle to the floor or let me collapse without lifting a finger, I might still be living in that basement, still shrinking, still justifying, still believing that love meant letting yourself be erased. But he gave me a gift without knowing it. He showed me who he really was. And in doing so, he reminded me of who I had always been. That is why I do not hate him. Because without his betrayal, I might never have found my voice again. I might never have remembered the woman who once worked double shifts to keep the lights on, who once raised a boy with her bare hands and a heart made of grit. I might never have realized that survival is not the same as living, and that dignity is not something you reclaim. This story is not just mine. It belongs to every mother who has been told she is in the way, to every wife who became invisible the moment her usefulness expired, to every grandmother whose name is spoken only when babysitting is needed, or a check needs signing, or someone wants the house. We are more than background characters in their lives. We are the reason they have lives to begin with. So if you are reading this, if you are sitting in a chair you paid for, in a room they make you feel unwelcome in, wondering if your love is still worth giving, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Do not wait until they forget who you are to remember it yourself. Keep your name on the deed. Keep your own bank account. Keep the receipts, the emails, the paper trail, but most of all, keep your power. Not so you can destroy them, so you can protect yourself. I do not know if my son will ever change. Maybe he will. Maybe one day, when the motel walls close in and the job offers run dry, when the bills come and the silence grows louder than his pride, he will remember the mornings I made his favorite banana bread, the nights I sat by the window, waiting for his headlights to pull into the driveway safely. Or maybe he will not. Either way, it is no longer my burden to carry. He made his choices, and I made mine. Now, I wake up in a home that does not echo with shame. I drink my coffee warm and alone, without side eyes or accusations. I walk barefoot in my kitchen and plant tomatoes in the soil I bought myself. I live, truly, fully, quietly. And if he thinks of me at all now, I hope he sees more than a shadow. I hope he sees the truth he tried to bury. I was never a parasite. I was the foundation. And when I left, the whole house fell, because my son once called me a leech. But today, I live, and he just has rent due every month. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of a mother, a grandmother, or maybe even yourself, then know this: you are not alone. Our stories matter, even when they've been silenced for years, especially then. At Grandma True Stories, we give voice to women like me, quiet warriors, forgotten caretakers, mothers who were never just mothers. We remember everything they thought we'd forget. So if you believe in justice that doesn't shout, in wisdom that whispers, and in the power of truth told late but told loud, subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens. And we're just getting started.